So, hello everyone, I'm Advait Kauta and welcome back to another episode of Grade 8 History. And I apologize for my long absence of 3 weeks, but I've been busy. I've been busy with exams, and so it was difficult to make videos all while preparing for exams. But don't worry, my state decided to give all students holidays for 3 days, and that means I'll be able to upload more. So, in the course of these 3 days, I will be uploading a few more videos. तो आज का एपिसोड किसके बारे में? As I said, we are discussing grade 8 history and आज हम देखेंगे pictures. The pictures all throughout the second chapter. क्योंकि usually pictures जो होते हैं उनमें से you might get one of two things. You'll either get a direct question, that is dates, names or something of that sort, or you could get a case study. So what do I mean by case study? तो ऐसी एक picture देंगे. So let's say they give you this picture and they'll ask you to identify these two people. So they'll ask you to identify who's this person and who's this person. So usually there are 4-mark case studies. And let me tell you how these case studies are divided, क्योंकि ये CBSE का board pattern है. So in case studies, 4-mark के case studies आते हैं, they might give you a picture, a paragraph or anything. Usually ऐसे pictures देते हैं, which is why I'm teaching you these pictures. तो उसमें क्या करते हैं? They split it up into 2 plus 1 plus 1. So there is 1 mark objective, there's another mark of a short answer type, यानी उसमें definition, they might give you a definition, identification of a person, of something of that sort. And finally, you'll get a 2-mark question related to the picture itself, लेकिन related to the picture or paragraph, लेकिन वो उसमें explicitly mention नहीं होगा. तो answers मिलेंगे कहाँ से? Well, you'll get the answers from these captions. तो इसलिए it is very very important. 8th grade onwards, याद रखिएगा, up until 10th grade, reading pictures and boxes is very very important. So now that I've explained to you the questioning pattern, जिस तरह हमें pictures पूछे जाएंगे, now that I've explained all of that, let's look at the main matter. Let's start studying the pictures themselves. So as I showed you, this is the first picture in the chapter and it is figure number 1. So what is this picture really about? So I'll give you an identification of the people in this picture. तो यहाँ पे जो है, this person is Bahadur Shah Zafar. So Bahadur Shah Zafar was the last of the Mughal emperors and he was exiled after the British came into power. Beside him, behind him kind of, यहाँ पे जो लोग हैं, they are his sons. So and the people on the left, that is the left from this side, the people on the left are British officers. तो ये एक ऐसी setting है जहाँ पे British officers are arresting Aurangzeb and his sons. So now let us read the caption beside the picture. So after Aurangzeb there was no powerful Mughal ruler, but Mughal emperors continued to be symbolically important. तो ये क्यों था? So अभी तक ये concept I don't think you've learned it, unless you've learned it in 7th standard of course, लेकिन 8th में भी ये repeat होगा. That was the revolt of 1857. Now there's a huge story behind that, लेकिन one part of the revolt also suggests that Bahadur Shah Zafar, in spite of not having too much power, he was considered as the natural leader for that rebellion to lead the Indian people. तो ये picture और इसका caption हमें बताता है कि after Aurangzeb there were no powerful Mughal rulers, as I covered in the previous episode of this series. लेकिन in spite of that, people considered the Mughals to be the natural rulers and to be the natural leaders in Indian rebellions. So that is what the picture tells us. So there are 3 things we have to make note of when we are looking at this picture. Number 1, who's the person standing here? That is Bahadur Shah Zafar. Who's the person on the left? You have to remember the name exactly, and his name is Captain Hodgson. Captain Hodgson. So and what does the picture depict? That is the third thing. What does the picture depict? It depicts Bahadur Shah Zafar and his sons being arrested by Captain Hodgson. So remember this context, और इस हिसाब से you'll get questions in the examination. Okay. Now let us turn to the next page. यहाँ पे हम देखते हैं figure number 2, which is the routes to India in the 18th century. तो मैंने पिछले एपिसोड में एक्सप्लेन किया था और आई थिंक इट वाज द फर्स्ट एपिसोड, मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया था कि लोग इंडिया पहुंचते कैसे थे, हाउ डिड दे रीच इंडिया. सो दिस इज अ मैप of exactly how that worked. So it shows you the British Isles, the Cape of Good Hope, which is the tip of Africa. As you can see, this is the Cape of Good Hope, which is now referred to obviously as South Africa. And then it shows you all the major cities in India jahan pe ships used to reach. So they were Bombay, Madras and Calcutta, which were later to become the three presidencies. So keep this in mind. People came from the British Isles, they went to the Cape of Good Hope, and finally they reached India. They reached India through three places. They reached it either through Calcutta, Madras or Bombay. और इन तीन cities की specialty क्या थी? They were later to become the three provinces. Okay, now let us look at the next page. On page number 11, figure number 3. Local boats bringing goods from ships in Madras, painted by William Simpson, 1867. So this picture isn't, I'd say, in my personal opinion, मैंने जैसे देखा है, how I've seen people answer to this picture especially, ये पिक्चर आइडेंटिफाई करना बहुत मुश्किल है, because it is kind of, number one, it's kind of a blurred picture, and second is it's a very very generic picture. It could be the port for anything. तो लोगों को usually समझ नहीं आता है कि ये पिक्चर क्या है. So in that case you have to notice one thing. Okay, leave alone everything, leave alone the ports, the ships, क्योंकि ये सब it's common in all port cities. You have to see this fort kind of thing present in Madras, present near the port. And once you see this fortress, you have to understand that this is a picture of local boats bringing goods from ships in Madras. Now, मैंने पिछले एपिसोड और आई थिंक उससे पहले वाले एपिसोड में, इन द लास्ट टू एपिसोड्स, आई कवर्ड द फैक्ट दैट ब्रिटिश स्टार्टेड समथिंग कॉल्ड फोर्टिफिकेशन. यानी वो पोर्ट सिटीज को ऑक्यूपाई करते थे और वहां पे अपने फोर्ट्स और फैक्ट्रीज बिल्ड करते थे. एंड आई एक्सप्लेन what the concept of a factory was during British times. Now this building that is over here, it is actually a factory. So it is actually a factory or a fort, and that is how it links to the concept जो हमने पढ़ा था. So if you see that kind of a fort in that picture, then you have to immediately understand that it is in Madras. And here again, there are three things that are always important when studying pictures, and this one is no exception. So what's the first thing? Who painted it? Answer: William Simpson. Number 2, in which year was this painted, or in which year did all of this happen? In the year 1867. Number 3, what context is it? What context is it explaining? It is explaining the context of ships bringing goods, that is understandably British ships bringing goods to the port of Madras. तो ये चीज अगर आप समझ जाएंगे, the reading other pictures will become equally easy. So now let's look at the next picture. Let's turn the page and let's look at page number 12. Now actually on page number 12 and 13, there are two pictures that I want you to remember very very well, क्योंकि ऐसे pictures में से questions पूछना, I agree, it is a little difficult, लेकिन sometimes what they'll do is just ask you the direct name of the person. Now the problem with these questions is, I'll explain it to you. So मैंने जैसे पहले बोला था, those 4 mark case studies, they're split up into 1, 1 and 2. That is 1 mark, 1 mark and 2 mark questions. तो ऐसे questions में क्या होता है, for example, you don't know the answer of the first question. You can probably look at the second question and understand why that question is there. So I'll give you an example. Let us turn to page number, I think this is page number 9. Yes, that is the first page of the chapter, and this Bahadur Shah Zafar picture. तो पहला question हो सकता है, name 3 people in this picture. So at first glance आपको ये question शायद से समझ आया ही ना हो, you probably haven't recognized the picture. But उसके बाद you look at the second question. The second question will probably read, who was the last of the powerful Mughal emperors? क्योंकि वो information दी गई थी वो caption box में. Okay, and from there you have to be able to link your caption and your picture in order to get the answer. So the trick with these 4 mark questions is, अगर आपको एक question आ गया, either one of those 2 mark 2 mark question or one of those 1 mark questions, if you can guess one of these questions, then guessing the others and answering the others becomes easy. But when we take the context of pictures like these, this picture of Robert Clive or this picture of Siraj-ud-Dौला on page numbers 12 and 13, यहाँ पे डायरेक्टली पूछा जाएगा कि who is the person in this picture, nothing else. उसके आगे कुछ नहीं रहेगा, उसके पीछे कुछ नहीं रहेगा. And that is the problem, क्योंकि आपको कोई clues नहीं मिल रहे. You don't know why that question is being asked. So that's why these questions, in my opinion, and in terms of what I've seen from people answering, these types of questions are difficult. So all you have to do for answering these type of difficult questions, you just have to directly remember the person. So remember any one key thing. कोई एक ऐसी चीज याद रख लीजिए पिक्चर में which you usually don't find in other pictures. Now all British personnel or जो generals होते हैं वो सब लोग एक ही तरह से दिखते हैं and they paint similar paintings for themselves. तो उस वजह से क्या होता है, it's easy to get them confused. So for Robert Clive in figure number 4, what you can remember is he has this satchel kind of thing in his dress. If you can see it, there's this satchel, and these satchels are often unique for each British officer. थोड़े लोगों के पास हो सकता है and a few people might not have it. In case of Robert Clive, he has that satchel. So when I was studying 8th grade, this is the kind of thing I remembered in this picture that made it easy for me to remember the whole thing. And as for Siraj-ud-Dौla, this shouldn't be too difficult to remember, because so how you can differentiate between him and the other Nawab that comes up in this chapter, that is Shuja-ud-Dौla, is you can remember that feather coming out from his cap. Once you see that, that is actually, if I believe, it is actually a symbol for something that for Nawabs of Bengal especially. You probably don't see that feather in the cap for most other Nawabs, as I've heard. I'm not sure, but as I've heard, that feather in the cap is specific to Bengali Nawabs. So once you see that, you have to realize that it is Siraj-ud-Dौla. Now, let's look at figure number 5 on page number 13. The General Courtroom, East India House, Leadenhall Street. So, यहाँ पे, if you see, it kind of looks like a courtroom setting where there's a, so this is the picture. You can see that it is kind of a courtroom setting. यहाँ पे benches है, and यहाँ पे there are the spectator halls where people are actually spectating. So when you look at a picture that kind of looks like a court, you have to understand that it is a general courtroom of the East India House. So here there are actually 4 things that are important. 4 because एक additional detail है जिसको याद रखना important है. So let's look at the 3 factual details first. First is, what is the place? So the place is the general courtroom of the East India House. Second is, where is this? So this is the Leadenhall Street. And third is to whom, who and which people use this courtroom? Well, obviously it was for the East India Company. And finally, you have to remember the context of why this painting was painted. To understand that context, let us read the caption. The Court of Proprietors of the East India Company had their meetings in the East India House on Leadenhall Street in London. This is a picture of one of their meetings in progress. So pretty simple. It is just a picture of one of their meetings in progress. As simple as that. So what were the 4 details? Number 1, what is the place? The general courtroom. Okay. And number 2, who used it? That is, the East India Company used it. Number 3, where was it? It was in Leadenhall Street, London. And finally, what context is this? The context of this picture is obviously that the court was being held us time pe, and it is a proceeding. It's a court proceeding of the general courtroom of the East India Company. Okay. Now, let us turn to page number 16. Now, the figures that will come from now on are extremely important, and I highly recommend that you read these captions once or twice and come up with tricks for yourself to remember these. I will give you a few tricks, obviously, because wo mera kaam hai. As a teacher, that is my job. I'll give you a few tricks, but apart from that, try to remember a few tricks for yourself, because these are very crucial. Okay, so now Let us look at page number 16, figure number 7. Nawab Shujaud of Awadh with his sons and a British resident, painted by Tilly Kettle in 1772. So, as you can see from the factual information, there are three things that we have to remember. Number one, who are the people? The people in this picture are Nawab Shujaud, as you can see here. Yes, that is Nawab Shujaud of Awadh. So that is the first thing that you have to remember. Who is in the picture? Answer, Nawab Shujaud of Awadh. The second thing is, who was it painted by? It was painted by Tilly Kettle. Number three, most important, is when was it painted? 1772. Now let's look at the fourth important detail, which is the context. So, the treaties that followed the Battle of Buxar forced Nawab Shujaud to give up much of his authority. Here, however, he poses in regal splendor, towering over the resident. So this picture is kind of uh, because Shujaud had technically lost all power, लेकिन उसको दिखानी थी कि I still have power, whereas in reality that was not the case because we are talking post Battle of Buxar era. And if you've seen the previous video and if you've read the textbook and studied, you'll understand that things after the Battle of Buxar were not in the hands of Indian rulers anymore. ज़्यादा power नहीं होती थी उनके पास, and so Shujaud was no exception, and he himself did not have a lot of power. Lekin, back then, people had a purpose for paintings. And the purpose of this painting was to show that Shujaud still had power. He wanted to depict his own power more and more, in spite of the fact that he actually did not have any power. So, the context is that you have to understand the main point here is that the treaties that followed the Battle of Buxar forced the Nawab, that is Shujaud to give up much of his authority. So what you have to remember is what happened, what caused Shujaud to lose a lot of his power. It were the treaties after the Battle of Buxar. The second thing is, why was this painting painted? In this case, it is painted to show that Shujaud still had some sort of power, whereas in reality he was kind of powerless and still a British puppet ruler. Okay, next it is another person's figure, that is figure number 8 of Tippu Sultan. Now Tippu Sultan is kind of an iconic figure that people लोगों को ज़्यादातर याद रहता है, and you can recognize him from that mustache. It kind of isn't hard to recognize him क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोग उन्हें जानते हैं. So you just have to recognize that mustache and I think you'll get everything else. Now, figure number 9 on page 17 is very, very important. So if you saw my textbook, if you were able to see it, you can see that I have noted two things on the picture itself. It says Daniel Orme 1793. Now why did I do that? Well, this is actually the name of the painter and the year in which the painting was painted. Why did I do that? Well, when I did that because it's a psychological trick. So whenever I was revising in my 8th grade, I turned these pages, and every time I turned these pages and looked at the figure itself, figure I'll not only be looking at the figure but two additional details along with that. So my visual memory will trigger, and every time that I look at this picture, I'll be able to remember Daniel Orme 1793. It is kind of just how अगर मैंने आपको एक scenery दे दी and suddenly I hide the sun from it, you'll instantly be able to recognize it that there's something wrong with the picture. Why can you do that? You can do that because you're so habituated to seeing something in that particular way. In the same way, your brain gets habituated to looking at the name Daniel Orme in the year 1793 along with the picture. So that is the trick that I've used here, and I recommend that all of you use this trick for everything else. Okay? So now, what is the context of this picture? The context is Lord Cornwallis receiving the sons of Tippu Sultan as hostages. So the people here are, these two are the children or the sons of Tippu Sultan, and this is Lord Cornwallis. So he's received. So it was kind of a treaty that they signed. It was the treaty that the Kingdom of Mysore signed with the British East India Company, which uh, in which it was stated that Tippu Sultan's two sons will be given as hostages to the British. Now, why did they sign this treaty? That is what the caption tells us. Actually, क्या हुआ था? उस time पे there were three powers which were challenging Mysore. The first was the Nawab of Hyderabad. The second was the Maratha power, the Maratha kingdom. And third was obviously the British East India Company. तो इस टाइम पे क्या हुआ था, माइसोर पावर वाज स्लोली रिड्यूसिंग, क्योंकि तीन किंगडम्स थी, एंड आई एम टॉकिंग थ्री ऑफ द बिगेस्ट किंगडम्स, मोस्ट पावरफुल पावर्स इन इंडिया एट द टाइम. और उस वजह से इट काइंड ऑफ बिकेम डिफिकल्ट फॉर माइसोर टू स्टैंड अप अगेंस्ट सो मेनी पीपल. So what they did, they signed a treaty with the British East India Company, and this treaty granted the East India Company Tippu Sultan's two sons as hostages. Okay. Next is figure number 10 of Tippu's toy tiger. I've written a little bit of a mnemonic here, if you can see it. Victoria 8 men. तो मैंने tiger का नाम रख लिया Victoria, and it's eating a person, it's eating a man. So I named it that. And थोड़ी देर में आप देखोगे why did I use this mnemonic. So this is Tippu Sultan's toy tiger, and it depicts a tiger. Actually, Tippu Sultan was called the tiger of Mysore, na? So he was kind of depicting that he and the Indian tiger will eat away the power of the British. So that is the symbolism. So they might ask you, giving this picture, okay, what was the symbolism behind Tippu's toy tiger? The symbolism was of an Indian tiger eating a British royal guard. Okay. Now, the second thing is, where is this toy stored now? It is stored in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So Victoria Albert Museum, VAM. So if you can remember the mnemonic I used, Victoria 8 men, also reads out VAM when you use the first letter. And I used that mnemonic to remember the place where the toy tiger was stored. Victoria and Albert Museum. Victoria Albert Museum. In the same way, Victoria 8 men. So Victoria, I get the first word directly. So ऐसे नाम याद रखने में easy हो जाता है. Remember that the tiger's name was Victoria. And what is it doing? It's eating a man. Victoria 8 men. Victoria Albert Museum. So if you can come up with mnemonics like these for yourself, I'm not sure if this mnemonic will help you, but it helped me a lot when studying 8th grade. So every person has their different set of thoughts, different set of things that they can remember easily. For me, something like this was easy to remember. आपके लिए it could be difficult, and it's not an issue really, because everyone thinks in a different way. And in a similar fashion, if you can come up with a mnemonic that you can remember, then it's beneficial for you. Otherwise, you can use this mnemonic. I just gave you an idea of how you form mnemonics. You link the visual, that is the tiger eating the man, to words, and that to the given information. And उस तरह से you can easily remember what is there in the picture and what are the details. So the third thing they might ask you is, what was the mechanism? कि ये toy काम कैसे करता था? So every time you pulled the tail of this tiger, what it did is the tiger roars while the British soldier shrieks. तो ऐसा एक sound mechanism install करके रखा था इसमें. So those are all the details about Tippu's toy tiger. Now there's some more factual information here which you have to remember. क्योंकि थोड़ी चीजें ऐसे होती हैं इन captions में ना, they might not give you the picture at all, but this question might just come directly. So it might ask you, when was Tippu Sultan defeated in battle? The answer is 4th May 1799. And what was he defending? He was defending his capital of Seringamapatnam. So remember these few things, क्योंकि ये direct objective questions के नीचे भी आ सकते हैं. Okay? And there's a box here about the legend of Tippu, and ऐसे जो boxes and sources हैं, I'll cover them a little later, but first let's look at these pictures. Okay, again in page number 18, we have in page number 18 and 19 even, we have three figures, three people and their portraits. So who are these three people? The first one is figure 11 of Lord Hastings or Warren Hastings. You have to directly remember this. So I just remember it as a bald person. Whenever I see someone bald as a British officer, that for me is Lord Warren Hastings. And what did I tell you for the previous one? Who is the previous one? Robert Clive. What did I tell you for Robert Clive? I said, remember that satchel that he wears. So, वो satchel देखते you should remember कि that is Robert Clive. In a similar way, when you look at the bald head, you should remember that that is Lord Warren Hastings. So just remember some specific detail about that picture. Okay. Next, figure number 12, a statue of the Queen of Kiptur. That is Rani Channamma. As I told you in the previous episode, she was a brave fighter who fought against the claim to paramountcy. So this should be easy to remember because I think, yeah, because throughout this chapter, she is the only queen that is mentioned who was also a brave warrior. So it should be pretty easy to remember. But the way I remember it is, she's just holding that, I believe, yellow and red flag. तो वो yellow and red flag देख के, those colors remind me of Karnataka. I just think of Karnataka when I look at those colors. And because, you know, that's the colored flag over there, I remember it as she was the queen of Kiptur or Rani Channamma. It's not that hard to remember, but come up with something which is useful for you. This was useful for me. Something else might be useful for you. Okay. Now let's look at figure 14, which is a portrait of Veer Surendra Sai. Veer Surendra Sai was also one of the brave warriors who fought against British policies. I am actually not sure if things about him are mentioned in the textbook anywhere. I don't remember teaching about him, but in an appendix for this video series, I'll definitely tell you some things about Veer Surendra Sai. Just remember the portrait and remember the person for now. I'll give you a few additional details once I release an appendix video for this chapter. Okay, now let's look at figure 13. Figure 13, this is actually a very interesting figure, and it's because it depicts not just how Maharaja Ranjit Singh holds his court, but it depicts a form of art in India. So what this art form is pretty, I'm not sure of the name, but it's easily distinguishable. तो आप कैसे याद रख सकते हैं? When you look at this art form, you can see that each character looks a little more realistic, looks as if they're not a part of that background. They kind of stand out from that background. And ऐसा art देखते you should remember Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So if you can remember that, well and good. But as I said, there are a lot of additional details in this chapter that I want to make an appendix video of, and when I release that video, I'll definitely include something about this art form as well. Okay, so but for now, just remember it as Maharaja Ranjit Singh holding court. And who was Maharaja Ranjit Singh? He was the Maharaja of Punjab when Punjab was defeated by the British East India Company. Okay, next you see figure number 14C, 14 ABC. So look at this. This is a map, and don't worry, this map won't be asked in the exam. Like this is kind of important extra information to understand कि हम time period में कहाँ है, कि what period, what level was British power at when we talk about incidents during a particular period. So figure 14A tells us how British India was and from 1790 in 1797. And जैसे हमने देखा, a lot of the things that we've discussed during this chapter did happen during this period only. It happened between the 1750s and 1800. So उस वजह से, while we refer to things in this chapter, we will be talking about British power as shown in figure 14A. So maps like these give us a clear understanding कि हम कि at what level was British power when we talk about a certain time period. So the second evolution in British power was in 1840. अब आप यहाँ पे देख सकते हैं, they have conquered a lot of territory. So the white or the cream color areas or the areas under British rule. तो यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हैं in 1797 they just had Calcutta, Banaras, some parts of modern day Andhra Pradesh like Vishakhapatnam, uh, and some parts, and it was very very close to acquiring Mysore territory. So you can observe a common pattern in 1797 that they were very close to close to ports. Now I'd like to take a second and think of this. Why? Well, the simple answer is in 1797, during this period, the British were solely focusing on trade. And because of that, they were insistent of occupying territory near the borders. And so they did not expand towards the mainland. Okay. Now, figure 14b of 1840 tells us that the British power expanded a lot more actually. Now it has conquered, I believe, Goa, and it's encircled all of Mysore. It's very close to Lucknow, and it has gotten control of Delhi. So as you can see, they have acquired a lot of territory than in 1797, and abhi, as we'll see as we move on throughout this textbook, हम देखेंगे कि by the time 1840 hit, British mentality was changing, और उनको लगा था कि now we should kind of turn into more of powerful rulers instead of just focusing on trade. तो उस वजह से they expanded more and more towards the mainland. And finally, India in 1857. Remember 14C, क्योंकि 1857 is an important date. It was when the first revolution, that is the first war of independence of 1857, happened, obviously, 1857. So the things you can notice here is now they've acquired a lot more territory, and the areas of modern day Pakistan, they have conquered almost all of it. So that is what the figure tells you. And as we read chapters, please try to remember these maps within the context of the time periods that we'll refer. So अगर किसी chapter में 1840 का date आया है, then you should be able to remember that British power looked like this. And if it says 1857, which is a chapter, if it says 1857, British power looked something like this. So remember these maps क्योंकि ये बहुत important है. And next we have, I think, two figures left, that's it. So let's look at figure 15 quickly. This is a very interesting painting. It's one of my favorites. It's the trial of Warden Hastings, painted by R.G. Pollard in 1789. तो हमने यहाँ पे देखा था, as I explained in the previous video, I believe, Warden Hastings was sent to remove corruption in India, but ironically, he himself was extremely corrupt, and he was given charges of corruption. And this is his trial. यानी जो court proceedings हो रही थी, his interrogation, his court trial basically, it is a painting of that. And you have to notice the amount of people that are watching this. It tells you one of two things about the person that is Warren Hastings. It tells you that people either loved him so much that they did not want to see him go to prison, or the people were just anticipating, they just wanted him to go to prison. They just hated him absolutely. And for those reasons, a lot of people came to visit this trial, because Warren Hastings was kind of a controversial figure. He was not a particularly loved figure, nor was he a completely hated figure. And उस वजह से and either publicity is publicity, so he had a lot of publicity for that reason, और उस वजह से a lot of people were attending these proceedings. So that is kind of the history behind why there are so many people in this trial. Okay, let's read the caption. When Warren Hastings went back to England in 1785, Edmund Burke accused him of being personally responsible for the misgovernment of Bengal. This led to an impeachment proceeding in the British Parliament that lasted 7 years. So there is a lot of information to take in here. So I'll just list them out slowly so that you can both look at them and understand the significance of few of these. The first thing you have to remember is who accused Warren Hastings of corruption. The answer is Edmund Burke. Remember the name? Edmund Burke accused him of charges of corruption. Second is, when did he go back to England? England, he went back to it in 1785. Next, how long did his trial last? Important information. His trial lasted for about 7 years. So, this is some of the critical information in this caption. So, the trial of Warden Hastings, and who was it painted by? Obviously, it was painted by R.G. Pollard in the year 1789. तो ये 5 details याद रख लीजिए, because this can be a very important picture and description, especially if your school takes complete portion like term 1 or term 2 portion combine करके if they give you a final exam. Pictures like these are important क्योंकि तब क्या होता है ना, they don't have scope for writing a lot of questions. तो उस वजह से वो क्या करते हैं, जो लंबे questions और लंबे captions होते हैं, only they'll include only those in the question paper. And this is a very long caption. This tells you a lot of information compared to the other pictures. तो ऐसे questions आने के chances बहुत ज़्यादा है. Whereas if your school splits it into a system of 50% for half yearly and 50 plus 20% for final exams, they might or might not ask you for pictures like these. So, and finally, the last picture is figure 16. This isn't too much of an important figure, but let's read it anyway. A Sawar of Bengal in service of the company, painted by an unknown Indian artist, 1780. After the battle with the Marathas, the Mysore rulers, the company realized the importance of strengthening its cavalry force. So, this might not come as a question, but मैं context दे देता हूँ कि why this is important. उस time पे क्या होता था? There was a new form of battle emerging. अगर आप globally देखोगे, people started moving away from marching, from people actually physically moving from one place to the other, to bringing in horses and improving something called cavalry. So there were actually two main tactics of war at the time, namely cavalry and artillery. Artillery was more of a Western thing. Artillery was ranged combat. Yani you can shoot people from here to there. It's kind of like cannons, if you can, but more of an older version of them. So it's basically ranged combat, and all of that comes under artillery. People like Napoleon Bonaparte, they were famous, extremely famous for their unique artillery and cavalry tactics. And looking at all of these happenings in world history, the British East India Company realized that they should keep up with that pace. And hence, they too introduced cavalry, which they called sawars. As I explained in the previous video, they were called sawars क्योंकि वो घुड़सवारी करते थे, सवारी. They used to ride the horses. So, it was called a sawar. So, these were all of the pictures from this chapter. I hope that you understood the reason behind a few of these and the reason behind few of these paintings, how to remember so many details, which pictures are important and which ones are not. So I hope you enjoyed. I will be releasing probably another follow-up episode, an appendix episode, where some of the details that were left and not mentioned so well in the textbook, I'll add upon a few of them, which is optional. If you want to watch it, you can, but it won't add to the syllabus. I'm just telling you early on. So I'll probably release another video in this series. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you understood all the concepts very well. And I hope that I was able to provide you with tricks for examinations. So if all of that has helped you, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and do all of the good stuff. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. So if you enjoyed the video, then please make sure to like and subscribe and click the bell icon to remain notified. If you know someone who is interested in videos like these, then please do share these videos with them. And I'll see you in the next one.